Welcome to High Stakes, episode 36. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. High Stakes is produced by Mike Lawrence. You can find him on Twitter at Awesemo. And I am here with, I believe I can safely say, the winningest, the most profitable best ball player in the history of best ball. I might be wrong about that, but that's I'm going to say it, and I'll ask Pat if he thinks it's true. I'm here with Pat Kerrane. You can find him on Twitter at Pat Kerrane. He won Best Ball Mania 3 last year for $2 million on Underdog, the biggest winner that we've ever seen. Of course, he's going to be surpassed, unless he wins it again this year. He's going to be surpassed next year. There is going to be a $3 million winner on Underdog. But for now, at least, I believe Pat's $2 million is the biggest prize we've ever seen in best ball, and I don't think anybody else has surpassed it with volume. Pat, what do you think? Are you the winningest best ball player of all time?
I think just with that one win, I did become the winningest. Liam Murphy, who won the year before, took down another 300K in two different tournaments this past year. So that was pretty impressive. And lots of people have been crushing in the best ball streets long before I have. But, when the top prize is $2 million, it goes a long way.
But does it hurt you that it's now $3 million next year? You're going to be surpassed right away unless you win it.
Well, it does. Yeah. I mean, Underdog, I pitched them 1.5. They
right.
didn't. They
bring
didn't
it back a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's
maybe flatten the payout structure.
Yeah. But I am going to be maxing Best Ball Mania 4. And we'll see.
All right. So if you are the top of the 600,000 people this year, it's even big. What was it last year? 450 or so?
451,200, and this year's 600 plus. I forget exactly how much. 630 something maybe.
So really, it's a lot number. Like 200,000 is a lot more, but also it's like the same kind of scale, right? It's about this. It's in hundreds of thousands. It's going to be nearly impossible to win unless you play it perfectly, as Pat did last year. So hopefully we can run it back. One of the two of us on the stream, I'll say. Hopefully one of the two.
One of us
wins it again next year.
Yeah.
Pat, I don't think I get the impression based on your response on Twitter that you don't believe singing to Matthew Berry about Isaiah Pacheco is the peak of your content career. Do you think you've had another peak out there?
Well, I mean, I did have a Ronald Jones song, which of the two songs that I've sung in my fantasy football career, that's where my heart is. It's the first. You're always going to love your first song that you sing about fantasy football player. And it was also about Ronald Jones, who, of course, is like my favorite player. So, of the two songs, I'll pick that one.
I've still got my first ahead of me. The first time that I sing a ditty about a fantasy football player is still ahead of me. Foxy actually
it'll stick with you.
Yeah. Foxy responded, Ode to Rojo is greater than Pacheco and perhaps even the $2 million win. So he's with you that the Ode to Rojo is the better of the two songs. And honestly, I went back and listened to it. He actually posted it. And I thought, this is the better song. But I thought singing to Matthew Berry, I don't think many people have sung on a stream to Matthew Berry, who is like the godfather of fantasy football. Like, he has over 1 million Twitter followers. I think he's going back to like my early days in fantasy football 20 years ago. I was listening to Matthew Berry's advice. So kind of cool in that sense.
Pretty indisputable. He is not the godfather of clapping on time, as we learned.
Correct.
When I was saying the Pacheco song.
Yeah, right. Maybe not his strongest suit is clapping on the time of the video. Pat, just to get to know you a little bit, I like to ask, where are you from? Do you have any favorite like sports teams or athletes? Tell me about yourself just a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm from Delaware, and I'm in that was North Delaware, which is kind of a Philly suburb in a sense. And most of my friends are all Philly area teams. I never got into the Philly sports. Sorry, producer Mike. So I kind of followed my dad's teams for the most part. He went to UNC, so I rooted for UNC, Cleveland Guardians, because he grew up near Cleveland. So I don't have a football team though. Fantasy football has kind of destroyed the ability to root for any one of these teams consistently. So I just there's teams that I will have like sort of affinities for, the way they're being run or, particular groups of players and all that. But I do not have a rooting interest in the NFL.
So it's an ebb and flow thing based on the personnel of the team at the time. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Vikings fan. I'm from Minnesota. I'm a Vikings fan, but still, if I have money on the line, I care more about the money than I do about the Vikings. I'm not such a diehard fan. So I get that fantasy football kind of ruining it for you a little bit. I believe I heard on a stream that you did, maybe it was a stream you did yesterday. You're living in Brooklyn now. Is that still true?
Yeah. I've been in New York since 2012, and moved to Brooklyn in 2020. and yeah, I love it here. So still gonna be I'll probably end up moving within Brooklyn
Okay.
in the next few months, but yeah, I enjoy being able to walk a lot, being close to stuff, being able to like get out of my house and then just be like I can do something, like I don't have to drive anywhere or whatever. So
And with
um
$2 million in your pocket, you might be able to get a two-bedroom in New York, in Brooklyn.
I,
So that's
to
pretty
rent it
exciting, right?
to rent it I
To
can
rent it.
I
Yeah, yeah,
can't
as well.
buy it.
Yeah, exactly. I lived in Greenpoint for a couple of years, and it's probably the favorite place that I have lived was probably in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. The place
Greenpoint's
that I think,
awesome.
yeah, I love
Yeah.
Greenpoint.
Yeah,
Williamsburg,
I'm
right
further
by.
south. I'm
Okay,
in Fort Greene, but
okay, cool, cool.
Greenpoint's a really cool neighborhood.
Yeah, I really like it. Um, all right, are you? I'm curious about. Are you a big consumer of DFS and or best ball content, or are you just you're producing so much of it that you don't need to consume other people's content?
I consume it. I definitely consume a lot of DFS content because I feel like that's an area where I'm more kind of just like listening to what other sharp people have to say about that. I kind of
Sure,
came later to DFS. Um, and so, and DFS, I feel like is so leveled up that like you really do want to be listening to the very best, most experienced guys. So, um, I think Mike Leone's a guy that I listen to for that type of stuff. I also listen to his ideas on best ball. He had an amazing article out uh, that's free called the Best Ball Manifesto. And so I do try to consume a lot of content on best ball for sure.
okay,
But I also sometimes I'll just listen to like regular football stuff, and that gets
sure.
me like sometimes I get like a little tired of like just thinking about this one game that we're trying to beat, and so I'll listen to regular football, which is a different game. It's like how do you work under the salary cap and all, how
Interesting.
are we
So what do you
building
listen to for
teams
that kind of
well.
stuff? And any like anything that you listen to consistently, or is that just kind of whatever comes across your timeline?
Kevin Cole's kind of my go-to guy for that. He came out of Rotoviz and has understands all the fantasy football stuff and is a fantasy football guy in some ways, but has kind of become more recently, like I would say, more of like a real football guy, but he does it from a very kind of statistical, analytical view. Um, and so I just
Okay.
kind of enjoy his takes on stuff. So
All
he's
right.
kind of my go-to for that. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is like I like Dynasty
Sure.
stuff as well. I haven't been as active in my Dynasty leagues as I probably should be, but that's kind of um, another kind of way to like, oh, I'll think kind of more about Dynasty if I'm a little bit best balled out or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different game. Yeah, I'm in a one unlimited keeper league. I've never done dynasty actually, but unlimited keeper is still a different type of format. I really enjoy that. I am not really into the real football aspect of stuff. Like I'm in a group chat with some friends of mine. There's a hardcore Jaguars fan, hardcore Steelers fan, and then some Vikings fans, and like they talk about all that stuff, and I'm just like I do not care. Like just like the salary cap implications and stuff. I haven't gotten into that. Maybe I will at some point, but a lot of my friends are very into the real football stuff. I guess I'm just too bogged down in the fantasy aspects of it that I can't spend my time there. But good for you getting into the actual football stuff. I'm curious. Let's get into your background just a little. So I like asking to start. Do you have any kind of formal or informal training in either statistics or computer programming?
Not really. I got my bachelor's was in history, and then I went back to school and got a degree in energy policy. And that was like there was kind of that's when I got like pretty good with Excel.
Okay.
Just because there's like a lot of doing stuff like net present value and kind of calculating out like tax depreciation type of stuff on like solar arrays and that type of thing. So I kind of like got up to speed, and then with at least like kind of fairly rudimentary stuff, but um, and then I was a project manager for like 10 years at this energy efficiency company, and that had some kind of data analysis elements to it. We monitored people's energy use down the path of kind of analyzing fantasy football from a more numbers heavy
Okay.
style. So it's sort of yeah, kind of like I've learned a lot kind of just by being super into it as I went.
So let's take a step back. I'm just curious about your like professional background and or like related hobbies background. So like take me back to what you were doing, basically since college. Like, have you had? So you said you were in energy. You were in a job related to energy efficiency. Was that your like first job out of college?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I waited tables for a while,
Okay.
just to to pay bills and stuff. And then I went back to school, um, and I waited tables while I was in school for a lot of it. Uh, but yeah, basically my like first like kind of salaried job was this project management position, um, and yeah, it was like the the thing is called demand response. You get like businesses can save money in the summer if they shut off a portion of their operations.
Okay.
And that the reason that that exists is because like during the summer, there's these like, might only be like a few hours in the entire summer where the grid does not really have the capability to support all of the demand that people are asking for. Everyone's cranking up their AC just that extra bit, and the grid was basically not built to. It was built to serve everything but that just little extra point. So when they're planning out the grid, they kind of have two options. You can either add another power plant that basically just sits around all year and then turns on for that like 1 hour, or you can get people to shut down parts of what they're doing, or maybe their whole part. You get paid. The more you shut down, the more you get paid. And so you just get paid year round, like that power plant that didn't have to exist would get paid year round just to be available for that 1 hour. You get paid to be quote available to shut down. And so then if you don't do it, then you kind of like you get kicked out of the program basically after a certain amount of time. But
So is
there's
this
kind
like
of this
a
thing.
government contract kind of job, or like
No, it's a private thing. It's a business. Like this is
Oh, interesting.
actually it's interesting. Like this was kind of like one of the first like profitable, like not like doesn't you don't need any subsidies really. Like you're bidding in to the market like everybody else as if you're basically a power plant. So you're going like we can provide this same service to you, the grid. And the grid is not a government entity. The grid is essentially like an organization that sits above all the utilities in a particular area.
Okay.
Um, but it's like a regulatory body, I guess, but it's like built up of all the utilities. So its job is to sort of the long-term planning and stability of the grid. And so they're basically saying, all right, like now we've projected we need this much capacity to serve this area, and we're going to need, that's our base level capacity. We're going to need all the time. Then there's this additional peaking capacity, which would be what I did. This demand response would be part of that. And so, then we would bid in and be like, all right, we signed, like we said, we can provide, all these megawatts of peak capacity. Now we need to go sign up customers to do this. So then we had a sales team that's like, all right, like you're going to shut off a megawatt for us. You're going to shut down like the steel mill is going to shut down or whatever. And then I would come in and explain how this all works and figure out exactly how they were going to shut down. Kind of walk them through like, we'd get into like machinery about which was going to get shut down and all that, create a plan, monitor to make sure it's actually happening, install the device that tracks to see whether or not they're actually doing it.
You're not still doing this job, right? This is a job
I'm not still doing that job.
Right,
yeah.
So how long did you do that?
I did that for like 10 years. I did
wow.
that from 2011 to 2021. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's a long time. And then, so while you were doing that, you said you started to get into fantasy football while you were still holding that job. When did you get into fantasy football content? Like how did you get your start doing fantasy football related content?
I emailed Frank DuPont, Fantasy Douche, the guy who started RotoViz. I emailed him, I think like 2013 with like a terrible idea for an article, and it didn't respond. And then I emailed him again for another terrible idea for an article, and he did respond. So, and I wrote that article.
What was that article?
That article was the sleeper you simply must draft named Alec Newts. I don't think whoever played a snap in the NFL.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, he was like, I think he was out of Buffalo. He did well in some market share numbers, but not in the NFL. And then I wrote about who's that Eagles running back that never did anything either.
Bryce
we don't have
Mike here with.
I think it was Bryce Brown.
Yep.
Then I was like, all right, let me try my hand at this again. Bryce Brown, got to get him. But then I did a series of articles with my brother, and those have aged a little bit better, where we kind of argued back and forth about, you got to draft this guy, and then the other person would take the counter argument within that same article. So started doing that, and yeah, just kind of kept on writing for RotoViz, started getting the podcast. Did a podcast with Ben Gretsch in like 2015 or 2016, where we did a preview of every team. We'd made upside and floor projections for like all these players on the teams. We interviewed a beat writer from all 32 teams. It was like an insane. Yeah, I actually don't think we should have been allowed to do it. It was like way too much work.
Not
like
allowed.
Someone should have.
Who should have?
They should have. Someone who knew should have sat us down and be like, "You are idiots. Don't do this." So but we did pull it off.
So were you doing that for RotoViz or for somebody else? Like, did you start your own website at that point, or what? Under what?
No, that was for RotoViz. Yeah, okay. That was all on. So at that point, Matt Freeman was kind of getting the RotoViz podcast network built out.
Okay.
And and we were kind of part of that. And then through doing the podcast over there, I was also editing some podcasts. And they were launching. Matthew Friedman, Fantasy Douche, and Pete Overzet had just started Fantasyland, which was kind of this like almost like NPR style, like This American Life, but for fantasy football type of thing.
Okay.
Highly edited podcast, and they needed some editing help. And so I got looped in with them and was excited to be a part of that, because the first episode they put out was just like incredible. So I started doing Fantasyland with Pete, and that's how I got to know Pete. And then we ended up doing an episode where we went down to Vegas and tried our hands at high stakes football. And
high stakes like fantasy football, or what do you mean?
Yeah, high stakes fantasy football. Okay. Yeah. FFPC, went down, drafted a main event team, interviewed a bunch of guys, some of the previous winners and everything, and we're sort of giving listeners like, hey, here's this high stakes world. Like, this is kind of what it's about. These are the people in it, characters in it. And we drafted our first team for that episode. And so then that episode sort of morphed into an article series, which morphed into a podcast, which wasn't called Ship Chasing, but was basically Ship Chasing. And then eventually became Ship Chasing. And Ship Chasing was kind of like, at one point I wasn't even writing that much in like 2019, and Ship Chasing was like kind of the thing I was doing later on down the line. It's just a podcast.
Yeah.
And a YouTube show.
Yeah. I think of YouTube as being podcast. When I refer to podcasts, I usually mean actually a YouTube show, but I do realize that they're actually different things. That's what I really mean.
Well, it's sometimes quite visual, which is why I say, because we were doing live streaming our main event drafts as we were doing them. So
sure.
Yep.
So you got your start at RotoViz. So I got to be honest, I'm not all that familiar with RotoViz. I'm sure that I've read articles on RotoViz and such. It is still in existence, right? Like, it's still a company.
Oh yeah.
It's as somebody who's like relatively new to content in general, and I've only ever done any content for Stokastic, it's really interesting to me hearing about like all the different sites that used to exist. And like a lot of the people at Stokastic used to work for FanVice or for various other outlets. So it's always interesting hearing about like all these names that you're mentioning. Like, I know the names Matthew Friedman, Pete Overzet. These are all people that I know, but like, or like I know who they are, I should say. But like, I did not realize that you all worked together so long ago at these other companies. So it's kind of fascinating to hear the background there. So when you started at RotoViz, were you like just getting paid like by the article? Were you working for free? Like, what were you doing there?
Yeah, they were doing, I'm not sure exactly how the system works now, but at the time it was like you get paid based on how many people like subscribe to your article, like through your article. Cause like RotoViz would do like, you'd get like one free article, and then the second one, the paywall would come up. And if they clicked, if they signed up to kind of on your article page, then that would generate like a pretty big portion of their sub would go to you. Cool. And then you also would get some based on like how there was some other part of it. It was like if your articles were like one of the top articles, at that time, and someone subbed through someone else's article or on the main page, like you'd get some cut of that too. So it was kind of about, that was sort of the model where that wasn't my favorite model, because I tend to write more infrequently. So I was like, it was like sort of like a one shot, like, all right, this article either does really well or I'm not going to make a ton. But it was like, and then I was doing stuff through the podcast, which I think also generated some revenue through there's like podcast code that you could put in when you signed up. So
Okay.
but it was
Huh.
all very like, you know, a passion project. I mean, it was not
You wanted to get into doing some kind of content related to fantasy football. So it
I
wasn't
was just
really about the
obsessed with
money.
fantasy football. Like
Right.
honestly, I was just like obsessed with fantasy football. Like I just wanted to write about fantasy football and think about fantasy football and talk to other people who are also obsessed with fantasy football. So I was like a lot of free time type of stuff. You know, mostly like I would just stay later after work and get an article out. And it was also just like I think there's just something about getting to write and analyze, and like I was a history major, as I said, and I think like just having an outlet to write was fun.
Sure.
Like I just enjoyed that, and that was not something that was really part other than like writing emails. Like that
Right.
wasn't part of my current job. So I think that was part of it too. It just like was rewarding.
Creative outlet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's and at the time it was just like season long fantasy football, right? Like there was no, and I don't know the full history of best ball, so maybe best ball existed when
I
you
wasn't
started.
even thinking about best ball at all. Yeah,
Could you even have imagined at that time that you would one day win $2 million playing fantasy football? Like that's just, does that blow your mind? Like,
yeah, because like how?
right. Like you get
Like,
into it
where?
like I'm going to help you win $100 in your home league. And now it's like, oh, you can win millions of dollars playing. I mean, it's not the exact same game, but like a lot of elements are very similar between season long fantasy football
For
and
sure.
best ball. So man, that's pretty cool to just like love fantasy football that much. When I mean, I say $100. There are some leagues obviously where there's thousands of dollars on the line, but to now
Well,
get to the point where like there's real money. Sure, sure, okay,
Dynasty was the thing that got me obsessed, truly obsessed, because I think there's something. Dynasty is not like, and I play in some, I guess like high stakes Dynasty leagues now, but like I don't even really like I play in a variety of high stakes, or sorry, I play in a variety of Dynasty leagues. Some of them with like $50 entry fees, some of them with, I think the biggest one, the FFPC does like a 12.50 one. I'm in one of those.
okay. I
So
was going to ask you to define high stakes because I've never been in a league that pays anything close to $1,000 entry fee. So that's is it like a 12-person league?
it's a 12-person league. Um, yeah, and but I co-own that one.
Okay,
And yeah, the ones I think the biggest ones that I am in on my own are like 350. I'm in three of those, and so I this would say like medium stakes, but like
okay,
I kind of don't like the thing I like about Dynasty, and I think why it got me so into it is like the stakes aren't really what matter. It's like
right,
the feeling of like I did this thing.
right.
Like I put together this insanely good team and it's gonna crush for the next 10 years and you
Yep,
guys are all dead
I
and
get that.
I'm the best. So, I think there's something in terms of Dynasty where, especially if you're gonna be diving into, all the analysis and the writing and, putting out the content on it. There's something about Dynasty that just kind of makes that easier because it's more of like bragging rights, right? There's more of
Yep.
your own kind of ego on the line with it.
I believe the league that I care about the most, which is the I my unlimited keeper league, it's like a $40 buy-in, and I think
Right.
about it so much more. Like I'm in fantasy baseball leagues, fantasy basketball leagues. I do the draft, like I basically get my arm twisted to be in the leagues, and then I don't think about it the rest of the year. But for some reason, the unlimited keeper league is the one that like, man, I love this league, and I actually pay attention to it throughout the year, and I know I could tell you probably just about my entire roster who I have right now, who I have the option of keeping, because it's just so much more interesting when you do have that. It's not dynasty, but the dynasty aspect of like, I got this player in the 12th round and now they're a second round value. It's so much more fun for me than season, just like individual seasons. It's
For
a
sure.
more interesting game.
Yeah. And
So
if you have the buy-in of everyone else in the league like that, that's just like that's the most beautiful thing. When everyone else is super obsessed
oh
with
yeah,
that same
exactly.
league,
Yep.
it's so great.
Yeah, in that league, it's mostly like that. We've got a few stragglers who maybe don't care quite as much, but in general, there's a lot of shit talking, which makes it way more fun if there's a lot of shit talking. Um, we're so when did you get involved in best ball? Like, I don't know exactly when best ball started. I know Underdog is now you won Best Ball Mania 3, so that was I think just the third year of Underdog best ball, as far as I know. When did you start getting into best ball?
Well, so there was MFL 10s was kind of a thing, and some of the guys,
I've heard of it.
yeah, I kind of knew of that, and some of like the really sharp fantasy football guys were playing those, and it just never really appealed to me because generally like the pitch was sort of like you draft a bunch of leagues and then you'll make like a good return on that because you're a good fantasy football player and you're trying to win a 12 team league. You're just trying to win a bunch of those 12 team leagues. It's basically
Right.
a cash game, right? It's like
Right.
DFS version of a cash game or whatever. So I never really got into it. And I think I did some like best ball industry stuff a little bit, and I drafted a couple here and there. But I was reading Sean Siegel's work on it because he was going super in the weeds on all these structures, and when to take quarterbacks and coming up with these concepts that like still stand the test of time. Like, you know, I just had an article on Legendary Upside about elite tight end, and I think that is a really strong structure. I was referencing an article of his from 2019 on how powerful elite tight end is in best ball. And so he has a lot of great stuff on the quarterbacks. Zero running back working in best ball, even though people thought that it would not. It's coming off an incredible
Right.
year in half PPR best ball. So a lot of that work was like really fascinating, even though I wasn't really playing a ton of best ball
Okay.
just because it was so good. And then I draft was down we did an episode on live finals. And so we went to this like live final in Nashville, me and Pete, and draft was there. The guys who started draft
Okay.
ended up doing underdog. And so I remember drafting on their app and being like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Do you have any
You
idea what
know,
year this was? Draft
this was
draft was bought by FanDuel, right? That
that
was a
was
company
draft
that.
spot by FanDuel. So this would probably been like 2019 maybe or 2020. There's probably a
Okay.
way to just actually find this out. I might not have been 2020. I don't think it could have been 2020, right? Just given the timing of the draft.
True. Yeah,
But
probably not.
it was probably around that time.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, so then when Underdog came out, Pete was starting to do his streams, his like a lot more of his like best ball live streaming stuff. And I
Sure.
remember there kind of being the buzz about Underdog coming out. And so I definitely did. Then I was like, all right, best ball is starting to become like a real thing. And so I
Yep.
need to get a little bit more into that. And so but I still didn't fully commit. I probably drafted like, I don't know, 20 or 30 teams in Best Ball Mania.
Okay.
And then Justin Herzig took it down. And I was like, that seems pretty fun. Like
Right.
that's like a real prize, That's like okay. Yeah.
Did you know
Probably
who Justin Herzig was prior to
I
Best Ball
did.
Mania? Okay.
Yeah, we
That's
did there was like a thing we did on ship chasing where it was kind of like World Series, Fantasy Football World Series or something, and Justin Herzig was in that with us. We had a team, he had a team. I think he won that as
yep.
well.
Oh wow.
So it was a hell of a year. And yeah, so I was like, all right, like I'm gonna take this seriously. I maxed BBM 2, and then actually I think one of my drafts got canceled, so technically
Oh no. So
yeah, I
you
didn't
didn't
get the
get the
full maxing.
cactus. You didn't get the cactus score.
I didn't get the
Oh,
cactus.
that's
Yeah,
embarrassing.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. It's tough. And then I maxed BBM 3 as well.
That's it's insane to me that all three of the winners of Best Ball Mania, so Herzig, Liam Murphy, and then you, are all people that I knew about prior to your wins. Like it was nobody who like was just a complete unknown. You all like Liam I had just learned of because he did a stream with Pete about his chess. Like he's Pete's chess coach. So that was the only reason I knew Liam prior to that. But like all of you were like already doing content related to fantasy football to some extent. So it's pretty wild. Like what are the odds of the first three winners all being like people that are kind of known in the industry already? It's just kind
And
of wild to
streamed
think
with
about.
Pete because Justin Herzig was
Is that
on
right?
that with the stream with the Fantasy Football World Series. Every single Best Ball Mania winner has done a stream with Pete that summer.
All right, I'm gonna do a
That's
stream. I'm gonna do a stream
100%
with
right.
Pete this summer. That's my goal
I
for the
would,
summer.
if you can get on. He's a busy guy.
He is.
He's got a
I've
baby
tried to.
girl.
Yeah, I've tried to get Pete on high stakes before. We've talked about. He's told me he would do it, and then every time it's like, yeah, sorry, I can't that week. So I've kind of given up on trying for a little bit. I'm going to start trying to get Pete back on the show though, because now I know that that's the key to winning Best Ball Mania.
If you're maxing BBM 4, I would recommend it.
Oh yeah, I'll be maxing BBM 4. So yeah, I'll have to get Pete on here. So let's talk to some generalities about about best ball in general, just your general thoughts on best ball, because I have a number of questions I just pulled from past episodes here. I've had chess. Liam has been one of my previous guests. Felix Casper was a guest here who won on DraftKings, won the Millie Maker there, and of course Eric Bimefor. I've had several best ball people on, so I pulled out some of my favorite questions from them, just general best ball questions that I'd like to talk about a little bit. So one thing that Eric Bimefor said is that he thinks one of the bigger mistakes people make in best ball is overstacking. What's your take? Do you think that people overstack their teams? How much should you be stacking within a team? What do you think in general there?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think. I mean, I don't mind kind of doing bigger stacks. And I think part of the reason that I don't really mind it is that, like, you don't need every single player to hit your winning lineup. Yep. Yeah. Or, it's like if you can kind of be like directionally accurate, basically. Like, this game's going to have points in it. And if you've got several pieces from that game, not everyone hits your lineup, then you're fine. The other thing is that I think there's something to the idea of, like, you're just betting on offenses, and Mike Leone had an article a couple years ago where he was talking about stacking and saying, when a team rolls, everybody rolls. And getting the quarterback and the running back from a team is probably not optimizing your single week upside, which is a really important element.
Yeah.
You want to take down that week 17 tournament. In Best Ball Mania, that's like really the very, very first thing you should be thinking about, is like making sure you have a team that's live for that. But I had Saquon Barkley last year and Daniel Jones on my team. Now, Daniel Jones didn't hit my lineup because Brady barely outscored him. But
they both put up like 36 fantasy points, right, that week, something like that.
Yeah, if Jones was in my lineup instead of Brady, it would have been fine. But the fact that Jones went off and Saquon dudded was potentially amazing for my team, which had both of them, because Saquon had been a big component of getting me there and getting a lot of other opponents there. He was really well represented in the final. The fact that he then didn't do anything, his quarterback went off, was actually kind of leverage for me, a sort of built-in leverage.
Sure. Yep.
And I got a late round Raheem Mostert score to hit my lineup, so I was okay at running back, and I had Austin Eckler, who went absolutely nuts. Nothing happens without that.
Yeah.
But I don't mind having, some maybe I don't want all my quarterbacks with their running backs, but it's like this offense is better than people thought. That helps get me there in the first place. And then, the other thing is it didn't end up working out. I had Daniel Jones stacked with Wan'Dale Robinson.
Sure.
But it wasn't like I just had naked Daniel Jones, right? So I don't know. I don't know that we've necessarily hit a point where people are – now, you certainly could overstack, but I think generally my view on it would be that you're like making the mistakes are really other mistakes. You're reaching way ahead of ADP. You're picking guys you don't even like.
Yep.
Your structure's all out of whack because, you're taking an extra wide receiver in a range where – you only have 3 running backs through 13 rounds, and you're taking a wide receiver ahead of ADP instead of a running back, when you probably should take a running back because, otherwise you're gonna be a little too weak at the position, whatever it is. Right. So that would be like, you don't want to get obsessed with stacking. I agree with that part of it.
Yeah, no, it's I think that he's right that there's certainly a cap on it. It's just a matter of, like, I don't know exactly what that cap is on where, like, I think the Giants is actually a great example of, like, where you could certainly overstack the Giants because they have 6 viable wide receivers who are getting drafted right now. And it's like, they're probably not all going to hit. You probably don't want all 6 of them. So I'm probably not going to want to take 6 Giants wide receivers, but I don't know exactly where the line is. I think.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Like, in that case, you're actually betting on guys who are gonna, but I've done Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston. I don't know that I maybe have then done Gerald Everett, but let's say those 2 wide receivers, and I've taken Josh Palmer at times. And okay. I'm like, this might be bad because it's to the point of what you're saying of, like, is Palmer really playing? But I'm like, I don't know, maybe like Palmer does play
Keenan
that
Allen
1
gets
week.
Hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. Keenan Allen's hurt for a week, or Mike Williams misses a game, and Josh Palmer has like a spike week. And I think price adjusting what your bet is, like, if Josh Palmer has 25 points in week 15 and 0 points the rest of the entire season, I want him in the 18th round.
Right.
That's a good pick.
Absolutely. And the rest of your team got you there. So
yeah,
it's an interesting discussion because I think that I agree with Eric that I think probably a lot of people are overstacking. I just don't know exactly where that line is exactly in terms of stacking. One thing that you said that I thought was interesting. So just talking about stacking in general, I typically don't think of it as being a stack quarterback with running back unless I consider it like the running back as a pass catcher. So the examples we gave were you talked about Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler. Clearly, I think of those as being stack partners with their quarterbacks. But what about like Kenneth Walker? Like, do you still consider him a stack partner with Geno Smith because of the factor like the offense is, as you said, like if the offense is going well, it's going to help everybody. Rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. Like, do you try to stack even when it's not a pass catching running back?
Yeah, I'm more interested in Rashad Penny if I have Hurts, even though those are like he's not catching anything and like their touchdowns are directly, they're stealing touchdowns from each other.
Right.
They're not correlated in their highest, the 95th percentile that are not really correlated with those guys. They're
for individual weeks. Yeah,
for individual weeks. Yeah,
yep.
They're negatively correlated.
But you're still interested in getting both for your for your roster in best ball.
Yeah, because like what if so in Best Ball Mania and really in any type of best ball tournament, because in total points, like the Eagles, all I'm saying, if I'm just like taking those two guys in like drafters, which is weeks 1 through 17, is like the Eagles are just going to absolutely smash, and their defense is going to be a little worse, and they're not going to pull their starters quite as much this year. They're actually going to play all the games in all the quarters, and they're going to have to pass a little bit more, but they're also going to be very good, and they're going to be running the ball down people's throats in a lot of fourth quarters and stuff. So
sure. I'm
just like, basically, you're going to be delighted to have any pieces of this offense. And if you've got, Hurts and Swift or Hurts and Penny, you're going to be pretty happy as long as those guys are getting enough playing time at the running back position. That's a little bit more of a clean cut case on a site like Drafters. In Best Ball Mania, though, you have to win. You have to advance to your out of your 12-team league. 2 teams out of 12 do that. Just as I think it would probably help you put up a lot of total points, it's probably going to help you advance if you're right in 2 different spots. The Eagles are just scoring a ton of points. But then you have to advance 1 out of 16 in week 15, 1 out of 16 in week 16. I think you could easily have, what if Penny has a monster week 16? He's going to be really highly represented in the final week. That will probably keep Hurts a little bit lower than he should be.
Yep.
Because he's not going to be as on, like, I guess if the field was like going out of their way to stack running backs with quarterbacks, I would be a little bit less inclined to do it. But it strikes me that they're really not. So I'm like, hey, give me the correlation of I'm still getting to make the bet the Eagles are really good. Nice, simple bet, and then they're really good, helps get me through in maybe a couple different ways through the playoff weeks. And then in week 17, yeah, I need it to be Hurts or Penny. And one of those guys is probably dead, or Swift. And,
sure.
But like if my 6th round pick or my 7th round pick or my 10th round pick doesn't hit my final roster in week 17, so what?
Right.
And I think it's not like you haven't set yourself up for some potential advantages before that. I think you really have. I mean, if just the idea of like this slightly boosts my chances of getting a low owned Jalen Hurts into week 17, like that alone, that could be the $3 million thing.
Yeah. And I wonder if that is like, if people who have drafted a quarterback are less likely to take the running back, in the case where it is a running back who is not a pass catcher, like if they're, generally going to be less owned in general, the quarterback and running back from the same team, if there is no pass catcher. I have not looked at the data on that, so I don't know for sure, but it's definitely an interesting thought, because that would be just one more bonus point for just drafting them together.
It's not something people are putting as much emphasis on right now.
Sure. Yep. That's for sure.
Even in Leone's article, looking at stacking, he didn't include the running backs.
Right. And as I said, I don't typically consider the running back to be part of a stack, but that's more like traditional DFS. Like it's a very different game, best ball from DFS. So I do think it's an interesting thought that in best ball you could consider the running back as part of the stack, even if it's not a pass catching running back, just because, as you said, different weeks you need, different outcomes can help you. So yeah, it's a really interesting point there. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Pat Kerrane to tell you about our sponsor, Underdog. You can get your first deposit doubled on Underdog up to $100 by signing up with promo code Stokastic or using our link in the description of this video. You must be 18 plus or 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama or Nebraska. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Otherwise, sign up now using the promo code Stokastic to take advantage of our offer. You can find all your best ball, fantasy, and pick and prop needs on Underdog. I want to take a step back though, because I skipped over. We were talking about your content past. I'm actually curious about your content currently and in the future. Are you still working for NBC? I know that you were this fall. Have you stepped away from there to do your own thing? I mean, you've got the Legendary Upside background going right now, so I know that you started your own website recently.
Context clues, yeah. I left NBC and I've started Legendary Upside.
I wasn't sure if you were still doing both, but yeah, go on.
No. No, yeah. I mean, that's a reasonable question. I am not. I left to do this full time, and yeah, this is the full time gig. And it's I have, so you can sign up for free and get a lot of good free content over there. There's a podcast, Legendary Upside podcast, which is available everywhere you get podcasts. That's been fun. Done some mailbag episodes over there. I did a episode called Best Ball 101 with Pete Overzet, where we went through a draft, kind of like, not like an actual draft, but like, okay, let's say you're in the first round. What are you thinking about in the first round? And that was simple. It's like, pick whoever you want, and then just remember what you did, and it's going to change a ton. But, and then in round 2, and okay, now we're in like round 4 and 5. What are we thinking about? Like, you're thinking about what kind of structures to use here. What are kind of the advantages, disadvantages of going certain directions at quarterback, tight end, whatever. So we kind of walked through that, and we kind of like at some points started talking about like more advanced tactics, but we did. I kept trying to pull us back and kind of talk about it from a higher level perspective. So yeah, if you're kind of trying to get a little bit more into best ball, I would recommend checking that out. If you're already into best ball, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, like some nuggets in there that you'll enjoy as well. But yeah, everything is at Legendary Upside now. I will say a lot of the content is behind a paywall, but I'm offering, the first year is only $69 through July 18th. I'm offering that. So if you want to sign up,
is there a reason you chose the number 69?
Oh, well, I don't know. It's $30 off the normal rate. That's why.
I see. I got you. Yeah. Is it just best ball, or is it also like season long? Anything else?
I'm doing a fair amount of like dynasty content as well, and cool. I will be doing more like kind of season long, kind of traditional fantasy football as we get into kind of the peak of the summer. And then I'm going to do a version of my weekly preview column that I was doing at NBC called The Walkthrough. I'll be doing that in season. So it's a year round type of deal.
And is it just you right now?
It's just me. Yeah. Cool. I've got a little bit of help in terms of editing and making sure that my rankings are staying up to date relative to, some big news dropping and stuff. So I've got a little help, but all the content is just me. You can get, as part of the premium subscription, you can get Underdog rankings that you can upload to the site. You can draft right off of.
Cool. All right. Nice. So I wasn't sure if you were like, I knew that you had launched this website, but I was saying like, is he still going to be doing, because I know you're still doing ship chasing, like you're still doing podcasts and stuff. But those are,
oh yeah, still doing ship chasing. Yeah, I'm just, there's just a little more content in the world.
Okay. Yeah. I'm making it sound like we're ending the show, because usually I ask people at the end, like, where can we find you? I wanted to get into that because I was very curious. Like, I wasn't sure if you had left NBC. Like, I didn't, maybe you did make the announcement at some point and I just forgot about it, but I wasn't sure if you were like still doing that, but also launched your own thing. I don't know, but
it was cool a bummer. I mean, I was doing stuff over there with Pat Daugherty and Denny Carter and Lawrence Jackson and Kyle Dvorak. We're doing a lot of podcasting and stuff. So that unfortunately is not part of the content that I'm doing anymore, which is which is a bit of a bummer. But a lot of the same stuff that I was doing at NBC, like kind of the rookie profiles, the deep dives on that, is what I was doing pre-draft. And I like to kind of do kind of more research based articles, and I'm able to do that over at my new thing as well.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on that. Just wanted to step back just to talk about the future just a little bit, or what's going on now. But I do want to get back into some general best ball thoughts. So another question that we talk about often is, do you believe that there is an optimal time to draft in best ball? And I believe, what was it, July 18th? Is that your the date that you drafted your winning lineup?
Yeah, and this kind of goes to, like, if everyone was drafting quarterback and running back all the time, I'd be like, well, I then at that point, maybe if Penny goes off, I want to be sneaking in a different quarterback, and so I don't want to follow the pack here. And I think in a lot of these like small edge type things, which I think the quarterback running back thing is definitely like on the smaller edge type element, it's like, what's the field doing? If the field's doing this, maybe I want to do the opposite. And last year, I felt like the field was really into this barbell approach. They're like, you got to draft early, and then you got to take a big old break, and then you draft late. And I was like, that's not really going to work for like my life. So if I'm going to max Best Ball Mania, I kind of want to just drip drafts through the entire summer. And talking to Pete Overzet, like he was doing that because he's got like so much going on in streams and stuff. Is like, we really can't just like take a giant break in the middle of the summer. But then as I got into July, I was like, how is this still not early? Like, because a lot of people are, were saying like early is May and June, and late is like when we have all the information in like late August. Like, dude, this is still early. Like, there's no training camp. Everything's basically the way it was. You have a little bit more information. So I felt pretty strongly that like July 18th is part of the early window, and it's almost like binary. Like there's like a 2-week period, and after that 2-week period or a 3-week period, then it's late. And maybe take like the heart of training camp off. Maybe don't be drafting after like the first preseason game. At that point, maybe wait until after the second or whatever. But that would be like, maybe, to the extent that I'm gonna like barbell, that would be it. Like I probably won't draft a ton after the first preseason game, because then it's like I've got some information, but I'm not getting like any great values, but I don't have all the information, so I might as well just wait like another week and get like some more like legit information, and then start drafting in and then ramp up. But yeah, I mean, there's so many best ball tournaments now too. Like, are you really not?
If you want to get in the puppy, you got to do it in May, because the puppy is going to be closed. The puppy one is going to be closing in a week, probably.
100%. Yeah, and DraftKings has a lot of great offerings, and there's just like a ton of really, there's a lot of best ball that I want to play this year. So I'm like, if I'm not drafting in, from like the last week of July through the second week of August, like I don't want to do that. I want to keep drafting. So I might dial up, and I will dial things up and down, and I will kind of think a little bit more about my tournament selection. Like, okay, this is maybe like a more random high variance because it's a bigger field type of tournament. Maybe I'll do that at a point of the draft season that I don't feel as confident about.
Sure.
And maybe try to save some of my Best Ball Mania entries as a result for later, for right before the season or something like that. So,
right.
But,
it's funny that you describe it as binary. I take the same approach to you. I'm drafting throughout the summer. Partially it is just like a lifestyle thing. Like I don't want to do 150 BBM 4 drafts in September. Like it's not going to work out for me. But part of it is like, I kind of think of it as a sliding scale. Like you get more information at all times, and things are always shifting. So just like naturally, if you draft throughout the summer, you're going to have a different portfolio just based on like, okay, now I have this news, and now I like this player better that I wasn't drafting before. And you're going to end up with kind of a balanced portfolio in some ways by drafting throughout. I don't know. It's but I agree. Like it's binary in some ways. And also I think it's kind of both true, that it's like, in some ways, like there's a period where like you get a lot more information really quickly, and there's a before and after of that period. But there's also just like, there are a lot of different things that happen. Like I was drafting before the draft even happened, and now we're drafting during the draft. Now there's going to be, I don't know, there's so many things are going to happen. So it's just sort of like if you do draft throughout the summer, it's sort of a sliding scale of information in some ways.
Yeah. And I think, so we were analyzing data for all this stuff, and you know, the data that we have is not all that great because it doesn't have this big sample, and people push back on that all the time, which I think, you know, a lot of it is pretty fair. Like, we don't have the biggest sample, but we also, like, when it comes to like draft behavior, like we don't even have data on everything. And
Sure.
like, one thing that I feel strongly about is that it's a huge advantage to be extremely comfortable with the player pool
Yep.
and to know where everyone gets drafted, and to
Yep.
know, like, if I take this guy here, it's because he's definitely not coming back. Like, I know if I pass on this guy, he's definitely not coming back. It would be like a shock. You can
Yep.
almost do in your head, you know, like there's like a 3% chance he comes back because you've just drafted regularly and enough. So if you if you take off like 3 weeks, you're gonna lose that.
Yep.
So I think, like, you know, we don't have like data on, or maybe like we do, but I don't think anyone's looked at it. But you know, could you look at like this player who drafted like consistently, you know, or
Right.
but you don't know what's in their head, like how familiar they
Sure.
were with
Sure.
everything. But it
Yeah.
is kind of like, I think there probably is an edge to just keep getting your reps in, and keeping your finger on the pulse and understanding where the player pool is at all times. How do we ever going to measure that edge? It's going to be really tough. We can measure things like, oh, you know, this, you know, teams that are drafting in this part of the year, it's better because of the X, Y, or Z, or, you know, you kind of, Mike Leone did some of this in his Best Ball Manifesto, where it's like teams that are drafting really early are getting the insane values, but they have more dead roster spots. So that's,
Yep.
and I think that analysis is really helpful. But there's also, I think, this other element of like, if you as a human drafter, you know, aren't going to be able to come in and feel like you're firing on all cylinders after you take a month off, then don't take a month off.
Right. That's a really interesting. So I never thought about that aspect of like just getting your reps in, and like as you said, being comfortable with the player pool. That's really important. Just for like, if you're trying to stack, you need to know the range of where you're going to be able to get your stacking partners, for example, and like how often does this player flip not go at ADP? Like Anthony Richardson right now, I mean, he's being steamed up. Everybody's talking about him, but like I still see him sometimes go and fall into like the 100 spot. Whereas there are some players that get drafted around is 80 ADP or so around there, who like you just know they're never going to fall to 100. Like, and like you only get that through experience. You get to know
Right.
like which of these ADPs have volatility baked into them and which of them are just like, yeah, he's never really fallen too far behind that. That's a really interesting point that you do. Just you get to know the player pool, and then and like where players are going to be taken, and then you can plan ahead for like, okay, should I reach to take this, Rashad Bateman, I think, is a good example. Like the Baltimore receivers, they're more and more, you can't really wait to get them at ADP because they are getting steamed up. And that's one of those things you kind of know with reps, the way things are moving.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. And it's so true that some guys have really tight bands on their ADP. It's
yeah,
like they just never fall more than a few picks. They always go right at that spot. And some guys like Anthony Richardson, his AD, he's a perfect example because like his average is based on some extremely bullish drafters. And then there are rooms where people are like, I'm not doing this.
right.
Like, you know, and then he will fall. So yeah, if you know that, you know, and that's a really important thing to know, right? Because Richardson's like screaming up the board. You're like, am I going to get locked out of Richardson? But if you, it's like, no, I've actually sat down, I've sat back and let him come to me, you know, close to
Right.
pick 100. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that type of kind of that like experience based familiarity with everything is really important, and
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to layer on things like stacking and week 17 correlation, you want to feel super comfortable with the player pool.
Yeah.
You don't want to be forgetting about, like, because early on in some of these drafts, I'm like, oh yeah, like this guy's on that team. I probably should drafted him.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't want to. That's part of the reason I've only drafted like 4 Best Ball Mania teams so far. I've been doing a lot of the puppy,
Me too.
and I've been waiting for the schedule to come out so that I can really, you know, hammer that week 17 correlation, which I do think is important.
Yep.
And build that into, even if every team's not super correlated, still building it in where it makes sense. But also, like, if I make mistakes in the puppy, I don't feel as bad about that. You know, I'm not burning one of my 150 entries if I screw something up in the puppy. So getting like the player pool's changing a lot right now, and just like having my just getting really comfortable with it.
Right. And knowing like tier breaks is another example of like,
Yes.
if I don't like, there's sort of like in the like late second, early third round, a bunch of running backs go, and there's like a bunch that are like bunched together, and like you kind of know that, and it's like, okay, when you get towards the end of that, it's like, if I don't take a running back now, and like you don't already have a running back, I'm going to drop off to like drafting Kenneth Walker, and I'd much rather have one of these like Derrick Henry than Kenneth Walker or whoever the options are. So just like knowing that kind of thing, yeah, it's a really good point. Just knowing how drafts go, having some familiarity definitely helps a bit. Slow drafts or fast drafts?
Fast drafts all the way. I cannot. I think I'm gonna have to do some slow drafts for some of the stuff that I want to do that's like not really filling, like non underdog stuff. But I don't want to, man. I hate slow drafts. I'm just like, I'm doing some slow rookie drafts right now, and luckily rookie drafts are so much faster. But
sure,
I am not. I think this is it. I'm not organized enough. I just have this low grade anxiety that I might be on the clock at all times.
I mean,
like,
you get notifications.
I feel it right now. I think I might be on the clock in a dynasty league, and I'm not sure. And like so maybe if you're like hyper organized and you're like, I check every 3 hours, I check my best ball teams, and I don't. Then in between those periods, I feel utter bliss.
So that's not
how I live.
I can tell you, Pat, I probably do 50-50 fast drafts and slow drafts. I am extremely disorganized. I am not organized at all, but I get notifications on my phone. Like, I mean, don't you just like, you look at your phone sometimes, you see, oh, I have notifications of underdog saying I'm on the clock.
Only way I can get work done is to ignore my phone for like 5 hours.
Oh, okay. I never ignore my phone for more than I'm on shows and I'm still checking my phone every 15 minutes. So maybe I'm probably addicted to my phone.
Well, I'm addicted to my phone, but I'm like hyper focus is like the only. So like if I need to get writing done, my phone's over here, but I just like ignore it, and then I just write. I think actually that's why I'm doing this. I think because I'm obsessed with fantasy football stuff to the point that like I can fully hyper focus on it and be really productive. Okay. Where like if I was like 20% less interested in this, I would never hit that point, and then I would just like get distracted and be on my phone and not really get all that much done. So, but therefore, like I don't want those notifications. Get those notifications out of my life. I've got an hour free. Let's fire off 3 drafts. I got 2 monitors on the phone. Let's do 3 puppies. Let's do it right now.
I understand. I think that's been the response of every best ball player that I've asked a question to is fast drafts all the way. And I think there's pros and cons. I initially didn't want to do slow drafts until Alex Baker, I think, made a tweet about doing 20 slow drafts at once. I'm like, okay, this is where it becomes like I can accept that. If I'm doing 20 at once, and I just always have like with every hour I'm going to be on the clock somewhere. That's where I start.
Yeah, one slow draft is sick. Like that's
just pain. It's torture.
What kind of behavior is that? Slow draft
could not possibly do that. So I just do. My recommendation, if you're trying to max out BBM3 and you don't have the time, as Pat, to like an hour during your day to do a fast draft, you can do slow drafts. They're not the end of the world like every other best ball person thinks they are. You just have to use your queue. Make sure you use your queue if you're doing slow drafts so that you know who you want coming up.
I've referenced the Best Ball Manifesto a bunch of times, but it was amazing and very comprehensive. And Leone touched on this too. Is there has been kind of this negativity around slow drafts because like they're seen as like less they're seen as harder because you tend to get like more kind of industry people in them or less kind of people that just totally screw it up, and so therefore maybe they're not quite as plus EV or whatever, but there isn't that much of a difference. So I am one to kind of look, I don't want to hate on slow drafts. If you like doing slow drafts, like by all means. And the data actually shows that like you're not giving up really any EV by doing slow drafts. Like they're just potentially profitable. Yeah. So do your slow drafts, but I won't be in them.
Well, that's one more reason that I'm going to do slow drafts. That all of the sharp people I've interviewed don't want to do slow drafts. Although, as you said, it tends to be more like overall sharper fields. I think, like as you said, like you're not going to get so many just complete throwaway drafts in slow drafts like you do sometimes in fast drafts, but a lot of the sharp people don't do them. So it ends up being, almost equal there. All right, back to, this is probably my favorite question. What is the most tilted you've ever been during a best ball draft?
Oh man.
Do you have an answer here? Do you get tilted during? I guess we can ask that first. Do you
Oh
get
yeah.
tilted?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I get tilted. I get more tilted in the high stakes drafts,
sure.
with on ship chasing and stuff. God, I've had like so many highly tilting moments on ship chasing. I do remember on this wasn't technically a best ball draft, but this is a main event, and someone took Ronald Jones, I think in the fourth round, in a 2020 draft,
Yeah.
which was an egregious pick. I mean, what a stupid pick you made, dude. Of course, I wanted to take him in the fifth round and wasn't able to.
And you have the
Um,
username Daily Rojo, right? That is your
yeah,
username.
yeah. My
So
username
he
is Daily
knew.
Rojo. And hey, you talk about the draftable player pool. I think Ronald Jones is back in it. All right, maybe he's a
He
bad
might be.
pick.
He might
He
be.
might be. He might not make the final roster in Dallas, but it isn't crazy. It isn't crazy. Daily Rojo lives on.
All right. I feel like I have so many questions here, and I'm gonna cut some of them out because we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to my final question is going to be tell me about your favorite win or win celebration. I feel like you've got a pretty good one, but I want to ask a few other questions first. Um, does the change in the prize structure on underdog, is that going to factor into how you approach the best ball season now that we have, last year was just $1 million to first during the regular season, now there's actually the top 10,000 get some kind of payout, it's 500,000 to first. Is this going to change your approach at all, you think?
Like maybe it would if people were taking a different lesson, but the lesson people seem to be taking is week 17 matters less and it matters more about playing for the regular season point totals. And I completely disagree with that. I think the fact that the regular season top prize was cut in half from $1 million to $500,000 makes it less important to try to build the very best team, right? Like
Sure.
most of what you're getting, they're paying out way more places, right? So there's more of the prize pools going to the regular season, but it's because they're paying out way more teams. But a lot of that's just going to be kind of like lessening, the loss of like your overall portfolio if you then don't do very well in the playoffs.
True.
It's not going to like make it I'm so glad I maxed BBM 4 because I finished really well in the regular season. Now there'll be a few people who definitely feel that way.
Sure, if you finish in the top, I don't know, 3 or 4, whatever it is.
Yeah. But the top prizes got cut in half, and then you go to week 17 and the top prize is over, it's $1 million higher than it was last year, and it's a more top heavy payout structure than it was last year in the final. So now you absolutely need to finish first if you make the final. You need to finish first. It goes from 3 million to 1 million. Second's nice, but then it goes down quite a bit again. So I think third is 300,000. So I mean, it's a big, right? I think so. Big. It's pretty big. Yeah. So you've got to be playing for first in week 17. And to me, that means putting like more focus on week 17 than, I think week 17 is like more important than last year because the top heaviness of the payout structure means like I finished 15th in BBM 4, and it's not as great as if it might have been if the payout structure was, if all the money was in week 17, then finishing 15th would be way better.
Sure.
So right. I think you really need to be thinking, how do I finish first?
All right, so you touched on this already, and let's just do it like within a minute or two on it. How much do you factor in week 17 matchups and or stacks? And those are different questions, right? So like factor in like, okay, the Chiefs are going to be playing the Lions, or I don't know if the Lions are still the Lions defensively this year, but whoever it is, great matchup. And then also like, how much do you care about having a bring back there for week 17?
So yeah, this is one of the things I think maybe the field will get wrong again this year a little bit. And I got this wrong a little bit last year. Like I was like, man, this Denver Chiefs game, gotta have it. And and then you don't want that at all. I guess Russ actually did kind of have a good game, didn't he?
Yeah, one of his few. Yeah.
One of his few. But we're not going to be very good at that. We're not going to be very good at predicting which games on New Year's Eve are going to shoot out. That's like, we're just not going to do it well.
Right. Yeah.
What we do know for sure, though, is that certain teams will be playing each other. And so if you're building your team to stack up, certain games, and those games have come to you at reasonable rates, reasonable ADPs, I mean,
Yep.
you're not overspending to make these games come together. You didn't go into the draft thinking I'm getting this Chiefs Bengals game no matter what. That type of stacking I don't think is great. Or if you're going, I've got to get this running back way ahead of ADP because he's got such a soft schedule in the playoffs. I certainly think you can boost the guy a little bit for something like that, but generally the correlation aspect is more about I already made a bet on this team because I have like a wide receiver on their team pretty high. I'm going to take another wide receiver on that same team, and I'm going to take a wide receiver on the opposite team in week 17, all at good prices. I don't even have their quarterback. But I have let's say an early quarterback. I got Jalen Hurts on this team. I got Josh Allen on this team. And so I'm not worried about trying to get my quarterback points in week 17. What I'm worried about is having a lineup that is just scoring a ton of points. And I can do that potentially with a Josh Allen stack, someone coming back on the other side, and maybe I have another stack that doesn't even have the quarterback. And then my backup quarterback, let's stack him up too. Let's bring him back. And you're doing it in ways where at no point in the draft, you went out of your way to do it. You didn't take guys who you absolutely hate. You took guys who you still think are good picks. Your structure's still really sound. You spent appropriately at all the different, positions. You did all the fundamentals, but now you show up to week 17 with your ticket and you look and you go, yeah, I know what needs to happen. If these few things happen, I'm going to be at the top of the leaderboard. And you haven't had to predict, oh, this team's going to be a pass funnel. That's not why you did it. You didn't. How could you have possibly predicted they're going to be a pass funnel? But you took guys at good prices who are correlated. And if one of the teams does happen to be a pass funnel, and they let up a ton of points, and the other team has to pass to keep up, like you're going to have to be very lucky for that to come to pass. But it's something. It's like we know these teams play each other. We know that for a fact. So let's use that to our advantage.
I really liked Adam Levitan's tweet earlier today. This is my entire philosophy. Okay, so I'm glad you agree. I'll just read it off. Unpopular best ball take. It says week 17 correlation is definitely plus EV. We should try to have it, especially in BBM payout structure, but it's not among the top 5 things I'd think about when on the clock, those being roster construction, stacking, ADP, player rank / takes, and positional capital. I 100% agree with that. It sounds like you're on the same page.
I'm on the same page, but it's sort of like I'm not quite on the exact same page.
Okay.
I think if you're newer to this, listen to Adam and not me. If you're like comfortable with stacking, what I would say, and comfortable with the correlation stuff is what I would say is like, what I like to do is I like to think about it maybe like even too much, because then what I'll do is I will build in little mini correlations all throughout the draft.
Sure.
And what those allow me, those create additional outs for me where if I get sniped on a quarterback for one of, I'm building up a stack and I get sniped on the quarterback. Okay, well, you know what? I already took a pass catcher and an opposing pass catcher. Now to build in a game stack, I just need to grab one of their quarterbacks and I can tack on a late wide receiver or tight end from the other team, or from the team with the quarterback. And now I've got a double stack with a bring back. And I took 2 guys that I liked at value in the first place, and I never got pushed off what I'm trying to do. So for me, like actually thinking a lot about correlation helps me never force correlation. So the thing I don't really personally agree with is like, framing it as what I'm thinking about in the draft. I'm thinking about correlation a lot. What I'm actually doing in a draft is not going to be, correlation number 1. Correlation can easily be, a side element that plays into like, but hey, this guy's an ADP value. That's one of the core principles we're trying to abide by. Well, he's also correlated. So ADP value plus correlation, smash that button, or ADP and he's like my favorite player on correlated and my favorite player on the board. Yeah, absolutely. That one's a no-brainer. But or it's like I could really use a running back here and like, wow, this guy, I'm already kind of building this Chicago thing. I'll tack on Herbert. It's
right.
It's not even like maybe someone pushed back on that even being a good correlation, but that's one thing I like. Hey, the Bears are gonna be better than people think.
Okay. So you have correlation in mind at all times, but you're thinking about it within the context of all of those other factors that Levitan mentioned in his tweet. You're still
Yes,
like, okay,
those are still more important. Those
yep.
are more important for sure. Like if you build a, I mean, one thing I was talking to Eric Klein for today on our show, and I was saying like, just like if you were to build a team that's all rookies, because you're like, well, rookies come on at the end of the season, right? And you have to win week 17 and you have to get to week 17. And so I'm just going to draft all rookies because that way my team will be peaking at the end of the season. It's like, well, okay, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like, it's that kind of lever that you're pulling with correlation. You're doing something that's going to pay off for when you get to the final. But like you do still have to build a team that is live to get to the final. And all of the elements that Adam lays out are the core principles of how you actually get to the final. But like, a couple of the things like the ADP value and your own player evaluations, which he lists as being more important, are two things which may run contrary to one another. So
sure.
like, how do you balance those? Well, one way you could balance those is correlation. I love this guy, but here's an ADP value that's correlated. Take the ADP value. You might actually need help. I certainly do, right? Like I am more on the player evaluation side of things. I don't like to take ADP value because I know better than the market. Okay. I know, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. And even though I'm wrong and I should just take more of what the market's saying is right more often, I actually need the help getting there. So to me, correlation is like, yeah, dude, just take the ADP. Like, it's like humility. It's a humility booster.
Sure.
So, but it can be the other way. If you're someone who doesn't really like, you're more like, I want to be in line with the market. I want to have a balanced portfolio, but I love this guy. Well, anytime he's correlated, take your stand. So,
yeah. All right. I like that. I like that response. All right. We've got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one more question and then talk about your final, your best win. Hannah Bennett asks, do you use a player pool when drafting best ball? What's your strategy when doing so? Are there any players that you will never draft that you remove from your player pool?
I don't remove anybody from the player pool, but I think the market's like really sharp on underdog and that, so no, and that would be, I don't want to do that because you never know. Like this guy's definitely not going to do anything. Like you don't know that, like
right.
Tyquan Thornton was my last pick in my winning team. He was the only time I drafted him, and he was correlated.
Was he in your lineup? Your winning lineup?
He was in my winning lineup. He almost caught 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But the other one went to Jacoby Myers, who was also in my lineup because I built this Patriots Dolphins thing. But I know I wouldn't have taken Thornton if I didn't build the correlated thing.
Sure. All right. We got 3 minutes left. Tell me about your favorite win or win celebration.
Well, yeah. So this as this Best Ball Mania on Sunday, as things were kind of happening, there was a period of time where I think like Austin Eckler had like a long run, and then George Kittle caught a touchdown, and then Austin Eckler scored a touchdown and something else. And I vaulted from like, I've been kind of hanging out all day around like 15th. And then I vaulted up to like second on the back of that. And I was just like, my girlfriend has been kind of, like there's been times where I was like third in the red zone and then, I fall down to 25th. And it's like, I should definitely not have told her about it.
Right.
I've had a couple small field GPP wins, but like 10K top prize type of thing. And a lot more times where I was like, this is a sweat. And then nothing happened. Yeah. But I was just like, I couldn't like talk correctly. I was just like, I'm running hot. I'm running hot, babe. That's all I could get out.
Yeah.
And then after that, Austin Eckler ran for that long touchdown. And that was the only way that I could have passed the guy in first. Like he had me blocked. He had like a lot of he had like Lockett and some of the other guys that I still had alive. And so Eckler going, then I went absolutely nuts. And then we got on stream and started streaming for Ship Chase and the rest of that Sunday sweat. So that was a ton of fun. And we had shortly after the win, we went away for like a scuba diving trip but we had already booked that in the summer, so that was kind of delightful.
Okay.
It's like I already have this amazing.
But now you can make it fancy.
Yeah, now we can do it fancier. Yeah,
that's awesome. So I know you just went to France. Was this in France? Is this scuba diving in France, or is this something else?
The France thing was a trip I did for my birthday a couple weeks ago. Yeah. This was a trip we went to Indonesia, Raja Ampat, which is like kind of this very difficult area to get to in Indonesia, which we then like lived out on a boat and just scuba dove for like 10 days, which has been something I wanted to do for a long time. And we had thought about doing it maybe in 2020, but then with the pandemic and everything, we it got put on the back burner, and we're finally like, yeah, let's do it. Let's make sure we do it. And so we planned it. And then after that, after the boat, we went to Vietnam, and I'd been to Vietnam once for like a week in like 2017, and the food there is just so good. So we just ate like the whole trip. We were there for like 5 days, and we basically just ate like an insane amount of food, which is kind of what you want after, like, you're on a boat. The food is good on a boat, but it's not the best, and it's this kind of things start to repeat over the course of 10 days. So you go just get some insanely good food. Really good beer in Vietnam too, by the way. It's
I've never been,
a beer culture.
Maybe I'll check out Vietnam as well. So lots of celebrations when you win $2 million. You just travel the world. Sounds like.
Yeah, it was pre-booked. All
right. Producer Mike has to go. So we have to close out here, but Pat, thank you so much for coming on to High Stakes episode 36. Where can people find you, Pat?
Yeah, Legendary Upside. I kind of tried to sneak in the pitch earlier, but I will pitch it again. You can get $30 off your first year at legendaryupside.com/early. There's also a couple promos that I'm running right now. That early bird discount's available through July 18th. And right now you can get a $50 underdog credit if you sign up and then you fill out a form. You got to give me your username, details on the site for that. But yeah, you sign up for $69. If you're playing on underdog, you'll get a $50 underdog credit in your account. I'm also partnering with Spike Week. You can get 40% off a Spike Week subscription with promo code LEGUP as well. So pretty awesome time to sign up. There's limited credits for the underdog, and the early bird discount only runs through July 18th. So if you're going to sign up, this is the time to do it.
And Pat Kerrane on Twitter.
Pat Kerrane on Twitter.
At Pat Kerrane. All right. Thank you very much again, Pat Kerrane, for joining me. Episode 36 of High Stakes. Thank you to Mike Lawrence for producing as always. And thank you for watching. You'll be able to catch episode 37 of High Stakes 2 weeks from today, wherever you get your podcast or on the Stokastic YouTube channel. Thank you.